Hey everyone! So, for my last criticism, I chose the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So, if you've ever seen the show or know anything about it, this might seem like a bit of a far out choice or a little odd. Um, but for me, this is actually a very special show. My family and I actually watch the show every week when it's on. And if you actually know about the show, you actually would know that it was recently canceled by Fox and in less than a day was picked up by NBC due to its popularity. And I'll get back into that in a second. But when it is on, my family and I watch the show religiously, and it's very like ritualistic to my family. So that's pretty much why I chose it. So my aim for this criticism, I want everyone to more deeply understand a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Basically, I'm going to break it down and evaluate the show itself, the production and the context, and then I'm going to critique it as well as wrap all of that up into a summary and make it more comprehensible for someone who hasn't seen the show or as many episodes as myself, as I'm pretty sure I've seen every episode. um, so obviously I'm an avid watcher. My purpose for this criticism, I'm going to critically analyze the show and its characters as well as the details of the production, just to make sure that everyone can see the meaning behind the series that many people don't necessarily see. Um, so originally I was drawn to the show because one of the main characters who plays Jake Peralta, who is the main character on the show, was a comedian on the show SNL. And I've mentioned in some of my previous videos that I watch SNL sometimes on my own, and I'm actually a big fan of his. So I heard he was leaving SNL and he was starting Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I decided that I was going to watch the show. And turns out my entire family loved it, and it's hilarious. And we've just been watching ever since. So that's how I kind of was originally drawn to the show, and then it just kind of snowballed effect after that, and now I'm a huge fan of all of the actors. So basically the show is about 7 cops, and they work for the 99th precinct in New York City. So it follows them around their crazy adventures, and they're not necessarily the most realistic of storylines, but they're realistic enough to where they could actually happen, just not necessarily in your life. So it's actually a hybrid drama. It is a crime-solving show and a comedy, so you get like the drug dealing, mafia, gun type thing, and there's always like something funny going on in the background, and it's really funny. So sometimes they focus on one or the other. Usually if they're going to focus on one, it's the comedy, but it's a pretty good mix of both, and it's a really good show. I highly recommend it. So as I mentioned before, the show was canceled by Fox and picked up by NBC. The show actually wasn't canceled by Fox due to a lack of popularity. It was actually extremely popular. Pardon me, I'm sick. And it was canceled by Fox because Fox just decided that they want to make room for some new shows, and they had run Brooklyn Nine-Nine for several seasons, and they just wanted something new. So they canceled the show and made it available for other networks to pick it up. And NBC picked it up in less than a day due to the fact that they knew it was extremely popular by other networks. By other people. So they knew it would be successful on their network. And when that happened, when it got canceled, the social media outlets were raging with anger. People were so mad it was canceled. And then when it got picked up, they were so excited. So it was very obvious to see how dedicated the fans are to the show and all of that stuff. And the ratings are very good for the show. It's been extremely successful for all of its seasons. And it's very popular for all age ranges and demographics. And I'll get back into demographics in a second as well. So, production information. The show was actually created by two people, um, a man named Daniel Gore and a man named Michael Schur, I believe is how it's pronounced. And the show always runs in a pretty smooth order. The conflict, climax, resolution order. They usually open the show with like some crime problem, and then a life problem usually occurs along with that, and then they go along and then solve the issue in the end. And there's usually some sort of like life altering decision in the end of, oh, how has this changed my life? How have I improved at the end? So, that's how the show usually runs. It's pretty much the same unless there are outliers if the storyline runs through multiple episodes. And there's only a couple times when that has happened. Coral Palms Part 1 through 3 is one of those examples. And I think there's a couple other times that's happened in the show's time, but not many other examples of that. So, the look of the program, it's pretty realistic. Everyone wears normal clothes. The set is normal. It's supposed to be like our time. Everyone's supposed to be like an average person. They're detectives on the show. They're not like in uniform cops. So they're supposed to look just like average Joe people. And they pull that off really well. It's really smooth on the show. You can't really tell any difference. And it comes off really well. They just look like average people. And the set is just like a three-walled set for their precinct. And then sometimes they're outside, like on location. It really depends on the scene. When you're changing sets like that, or changing scenes like that as many times as they are, with crime shows, they have so many different locations. It's hard to tell. Sometimes they have sets, sometimes they don't. It really just depends. The codes of the show, I said that they were pretty realistic. The storylines sometimes, like, they don't seem very realistic, but they ultimately are things that could happen in real life. They just wouldn't necessarily always happen to you, but they are realistic things, just with like a comedic twist to them. So context, the casting on this show is fantastic. Comedians all have like fantastic backgrounds. Their representation is fantastic on this show. They have Hispanic roles, they have African Americans, they have Caucasian people on the show. They have LGBTQ plus representation, which is nice, and it all flows fluidly. Like, they don't stick out on the show, they don't shove it down your throat on the show, which I think is nice because sometimes they try to, on other shows, they try to push that on you and like make a statement with that kind of stuff. Where on this show, it's very natural and like it should be in society. And I mentioned demographics earlier. There really aren't very many demographics with this show, as in, by what I mean by that is this show appeals to everyone except for little kids. I would not recommend this show for little kids just because some of the content is inappropriate for little kids, and I don't think the jokes would make sense to them. So I would say it appeals to young adults and older adults. They make references that, like, I don't understand because they're, like, aimed towards people my parents and my grandparents' age. And then they have jokes that, like, my mom thinks are inappropriate, but I think are funny. So they definitely have, like, a wide range of ages. And then I think the representation plays a large role in that as well. So the female and male and LGBT and race, like, nobody feels like they can't watch the show either. So I feel like everyone feels like they can watch the show and enjoy the show. So I think it definitely appeals to everyone except for little kids. So I think the thing that people don't realize about the show is that it actually has like a goal and a meaning. So, looking at the show, I think it definitely seems very stupid. Like I'll admit it. It seems like a really stupid show, and it seems like it doesn't have any sort of meaning. Um, but when you look at it deeper, you can definitely tell that the show has some sort of life lesson at the end. So when you watch the show, Jake Peralta, the main character, always comes to some sort of life altering decision at the end, like I mentioned earlier. So he always comes to this realization of, like, oh, I should have done this, I shouldn't have lied, or I should have just come to this realization earlier, or something like that. And in reality, it comes to this realization after watching a few episodes that, like, this show isn't necessarily about always just being funny and being a cop. It's really about, like, choosing who your friends are and choosing how to live your life and who your family is, um, and that your family is really like your home. So it doesn't necessarily seem that way at first, but when you really critically evaluate the show, you can tell that throughout the characters, like, interactions with each other and how they evolve throughout the show. So I think the show is really awesome. I think that it's a great way for Americans to see how everyone interacts with each other, and I think it really appeals to a lot of people. I think it's so funny, um, and I just think it's really, really a great show for everyone to watch. So I highly recommend it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. So have a good one. Bye.